December 1994, Jacobo Grinberg, a renowned Mexican neuroscientist, disappeared without a trace. He wasn't just any scientist. He was on the verge of uncovering something revolutionary, something that could shake the very foundations of how we understand consciousness and reality. His work explored the idea that the human mind is not an isolated entity, but part of a vast, interconnected network of consciousness, a living matrix of energy and information that shapes the reality we perceive. His research revealed that our thoughts, intentions, and perceptions do not just exist in our heads, but interact with an unseen field of pure potentiality. He called this field the ltis, a term he used to describe a quantum-like structure that underlies reality. But just when Grinberg thought he was on the edge of making a groundbreaking discovery, something very unexpected happened. Before he could fully publish his findings, he vanished without a single clue left behind. No body, no final messages, no evidence of what happened. One day, he was a respected scientist pushing the boundaries of human knowledge, and the next, he was erased from existence. Was he silenced because his discoveries were too powerful? Did he stumble upon something that those in control didn't want the world to know? Or more mysteriously, did he unlock a truth so profound that it altered his very perception of existence, leading to his own disappearance? This is not just a story about Grinberg. It is about a hidden code, one that connects our minds, our experiences, and the very nature of the universe itself. Throughout history, scientists, mystics, and philosophers have tried to decipher this code, only to be met with skepticism, suppression, or outright dismissal. But what if they were right all along? Imagine, for a moment, that your consciousness is not confined to your brain, but is part of a vast, intricate web of intelligence, an invisible force that connects all living things. Neuroscientist Jacobo Grinberg proposed that the brain is not just a biological processor, but a transducer, meaning it doesn't generate consciousness, but tunes into a larger, pre-existing field of awareness. If true, this would mean that human perception is not just a passive experience. It is an active process that co-creates reality itself. But this idea isn't new. Swiss psychologist Carl Jung introduced the concept of synchronicity, the idea that meaningful coincidences are not random, but rather glimpses into a causal, interconnected structure of reality. Think about the moments in your life when you've had a strange coincidence. You think of a friend you haven't spoken to in years, and suddenly they message you. You decide to take a different route home and avoid an accident. Are these mere accidents, or is there an unseen force aligning events in our lives? Physicist David Bohm, one of the pioneers of quantum mechanics, expanded on this idea with his theory of the implicate order. According to Bohm, the universe is not made of separate objects interacting randomly, but is instead an interconnected, flowing whole, where everything is part of a greater, unseen reality. If Bohm was correct, then the world we see is just a projection, a simplified version of a much deeper and more complex reality that exists beyond our senses. Grinberg's research aligned perfectly with this, suggesting that what we perceive as physical reality is actually an interface between our minds and this deeper field of consciousness. Grinberg, Jung, and Bohm, three brilliant minds from different fields of study, yet all pointing toward the same undeniable truth. Reality is not what it seems. Consciousness is not just a byproduct of the brain. It is a force, perhaps the most fundamental force of all, that shapes the universe itself. The implications of this research are monumental, If consciousness is not just a side effect of neurons firing, but an intrinsic part of reality, then everything we assume about life, death, and the universe itself must be reconsidered. What if synchronicity, telepathy, and even precognition are not mere illusions, but real phenomena rooted in the deeper fabric of existence? What if the reason certain knowledge, like Grinberg's research, gets suppressed is because it challenges the very nature of the power structures that define our world? What you are about to explore is not just a scientific discussion. It is a journey into the very fabric of existence, one that has puzzled humanity for centuries. The exploration of quantum physics, neuroscience, philosophy, and mysticism reveals hidden threads that bind us all together, suggesting that the universe is far more conscious and interconnected than we have been led to believe. Prepare to question everything. By the end of this journey, you may never see reality the same way again. From the earliest human civilizations to modern scientific inquiry, the idea that consciousness is not isolated within individual minds, but rather part of a vast, interconnected network has persisted. In religious traditions, this is often described as the divine presence that permeates all things. In scientific terms, thinkers like Jacobo Grinberg, Carl Jung, and David Bohm have sought to uncover an underlying structure of consciousness that links all living beings. But what does this actually mean? Could consciousness exist as a field, much like gravity or electromagnetism, influencing not just our thoughts and perceptions, but the very fabric of reality? Jacobo Grinberg's synergetic theory proposed that reality is not constructed externally, but is instead a mental field shaped by perception. According to his research, the brain does not merely interpret sensory data from the external world. It actively generates the reality we experience by interfacing with what he called the ltis, a fundamental field of information and energy that underlies all existence. This theory aligns with David Bohm's concept of the implicate order, which suggests that everything in the universe is fundamentally interconnected. What we perceive as separate objects or independent events are actually expressions of a much deeper, unified reality. If this is true, then our everyday experiences may be fragments of a much larger whole, mere projections from a more profound dimension of existence. Carl Jung's exploration of synchronicity, the meaningful connection of seemingly unrelated events, further supports this idea. Jung believed that consciousness extends beyond the personal psyche into what he termed the collective unconscious, a shared informational reservoir that connects all human beings. He argued that significant coincidences are not just random occurrences, but rather expressions of an underlying pattern within reality itself. When individuals experience repeated synchronicities, such as dreaming of an event before it happens, or encountering the same symbols repeatedly in unexpected places, they may be tapping into this deeper field of interconnected consciousness. Quantum mechanics, particularly the study of non-locality and entanglement, offers scientific support for these ideas. In quantum entanglement, two particles can become so deeply linked that a change in one instantaneously affects the other, regardless of distance. If particles can be connected across vast distances in ways that defy classical physics, could human consciousness operate in a similar fashion? Some physicists, including Roger Penrose, have speculated that consciousness itself may be a quantum process, suggesting that our thoughts and awareness are not merely biochemical reactions, but interactions with a larger quantum field. These ideas challenge the traditional materialist paradigm, which holds that consciousness is merely an emergent property of the brain. If consciousness is instead fundamental to the structure of the universe, as Grinberg, Bohm, and Jung suggest, then reality itself is not an objective, external construct, but rather a dynamic, co-created experience. This could explain why subjective experiences, intuition, and even mystical insights can sometimes reveal information that defies conventional logic. Throughout history, various spiritual traditions have pointed to this interconnected reality. In Hinduism, the concept of Brahman describes an ultimate, unifying consciousness that permeates everything. Buddhist philosophy speaks of Indra's net, an infinite web where every point reflects and contains the whole. Indigenous belief systems often emphasize the deep connection between all living things, viewing the world as a network of energy and spirit rather than a collection of separate objects. Modern scientific research into consciousness and quantum physics is, in many ways, rediscovering these ancient insights. Grinberg's work took these ideas further by attempting to scientifically measure consciousness and its interaction with the external world. His laboratory experiments revealed that human intention could influence physical matter and that individuals could experience shared mental states even when separated by great distances. These findings, though controversial, resonate with contemporary research into morphic fields, a theory proposed by biologist Rupert Sheldrake. According to Sheldrake, nature itself has memory, and behaviors or forms learned by one group of organisms can become accessible to others, even if they are physically isolated. This theory provides a potential explanation for phenomena such as the 100th monkey effect, where new behaviors or knowledge seem to spread mysteriously among separate populations. If consciousness is indeed a field, then what we think, feel, and believe may have far-reaching effects beyond our individual selves. This would mean that our thoughts are not confined within our skulls, but ripple outward, influencing reality in ways that science is only beginning to understand. Perhaps this is why ancient spiritual traditions emphasize the power of meditation, focused intention, and deep awareness, because these practices may not simply be for personal enlightenment, but could actually shape the world itself. At this point, the question becomes clear. If our minds are truly part of a vast, interconnected field of consciousness, how do we harness this knowledge? And if those in power have sought to suppress these discoveries, what are they trying to keep hidden? Modern science has long been dominated by a materialist paradigm, a view that the universe consists only of matter and that consciousness is merely a byproduct of complex neural activity. This perspective, deeply rooted in Newtonian physics and classical biology, asserts that thoughts, emotions, and awareness emerge solely from the physical interactions of neurons in the brain. However, cutting-edge research in neuroscience, quantum mechanics, and theoretical physics has begun to challenge this limited perspective, suggesting that consciousness is not an isolated phenomenon, but rather an intrinsic and fundamental aspect of reality itself. Jacobo Grinberg's synergetic theory proposed that consciousness is not a product of the brain, but an active participant in shaping reality. This aligns with findings from quantum mechanics, particularly the observer effect, which suggests that the act of observation influences the behavior of quantum particles. The famous double-slit experiment demonstrated that light and electrons behave as both particles and waves, but only when they are not being observed. When measured or watched, they collapse into a single state, as if the act of consciousness itself forces them into a fixed reality. This raises a profound question. If observation determines the behavior of fundamental particles, to what extent does human consciousness influence reality at large? Roger Penrose, a mathematical physicist and one of the leading minds in quantum consciousness studies, proposed that the brain operates using quantum processes rather than classical computation. He collaborated with anesthesiologist Stuart Hameroff to develop the orchestrated objective reduction, or OR theory, which suggests that consciousness arises from quantum processes occurring in microtubules, tiny structures within brain cells. According to this theory, the mind is not just an emergent property of the brain, but is linked to quantum states that exist beyond space and time. If true, this would mean that human consciousness is not confined to the body, but exists within a greater quantum field, aligning with Grinberg's idea of an interconnected mental structure shaping reality. Another field that challenges the classical understanding of consciousness is non-locality, the idea that objects or events can be connected without any direct physical interaction. This is most clearly demonstrated in quantum entanglement, where two particles, no matter how far apart, remain instantaneously linked. When the state of one particle changes, the other reflects the change immediately, defying the limits of classical physics. Einstein famously called this spooky action at a distance, yet it has been experimentally confirmed multiple times. If subatomic particles can share information instantaneously, could human consciousness also operate on similar principles? Grinberg's laboratory experiments sought to answer this question. One of his most remarkable studies involved telepathic communication between individuals placed in separate rooms. In these experiments, pairs of participants were monitored using EEG scans, while one individual was exposed to an external stimulus, such as a flashing light. Remarkably, even though the second participant was not exposed to the light, their brainwaves exhibited synchronized activity with the first participant, suggesting that information was being shared between their minds through a non-physical medium. These results, though controversial, hinted at the existence of a shared consciousness network, much like Jung's concept of the collective unconscious. This idea finds support in the work of biologist Rupert Sheldrake, who developed the theory of morphic resonance. Sheldrake proposed that living organisms inherit not just genetic information, but also behavioral and cognitive patterns from a collective memory field. His studies on animals demonstrated that learned behaviors could suddenly appear in isolated populations without any direct communication or contact. Similarly, human cultural evolution often exhibits simultaneous innovations, where the same scientific discoveries, artistic styles, or technological advancements emerge independently in different parts of the world. Could this be evidence of an underlying informational field connecting all minds? If consciousness is indeed a non-local phenomenon, this could explain why people across different cultures report similar mystical experiences, near-death encounters, and out-of-body phenomena. It could also offer a scientific basis for the 100th monkey effect, in which a new behavior spreads rapidly among a species once a critical number of individuals adopt it. One striking example of the same phenomenon emerging in different parts of the world with little or no connection is the Indlet-Ucent invention of agriculture. Before agriculture, humans primarily lived as hunter-gatherers, moving from place to place in search of food. However, around the same time period, different civilizations in vastly separated regions of the world began to transition to farming. Despite having no direct contact with one another, people in the Middle East, China, Mesoamerica, South America, and Africa independently discovered how to domesticate plants and animals, fundamentally changing human society. In the Fertile Crescent, around 10,000 BCE, early humans began cultivating wheat, barley, and lentils. This shift allowed people to settle in one place, leading to the development of villages and eventually cities. Meanwhile, in China, a similar transformation was taking place around 7000 BCE. Farmers in the Yangtze and Yellow River valleys began cultivating rice and millet, creating one of the world's first agrarian societies. Although these regions were thousands of miles apart, both developed agriculture as a response to environmental pressures and the need for a stable food supply. Around 5000 BCE, a separate agricultural revolution occurred in Mesoamerica. Indigenous people in present-day Mexico domesticated maize, beans, and squash, laying the foundation for civilizations like the Maya and Aztecs. Meanwhile, in the Andes region of South America, another independent agricultural development took place around 4000 BCE. People in modern-day Peru cultivated potatoes, quinoa, and other high-altitude crops, adapting to the harsh, mountainous terrain. A similar pattern was observed in sub-Saharan Africa around 3000 BCE, where agriculture emerged with crops like sorghum and yams. These farming practices developed independently of those in Eurasia or the Americas, showing that different human groups, when faced with similar challenges, often arrived at the same groundbreaking solutions. Despite having no direct contact, these civilizations all transitioned from hunting and gathering to farming, proving that human ingenuity follows universal patterns. This independent development of agriculture shaped human history, leading to permanent settlements, social hierarchies, and the eventual rise of complex civilizations. It remains one of the most significant examples of parallel discovery in world history. The independent rise of agriculture in different parts of the world is a powerful example of how consciousness and information may be interconnected beyond direct physical communication. This phenomenon aligns with the concepts discussed earlier, particularly synchronicity, morphogenetic fields, and the idea that knowledge exists in a shared informational structure rather than being purely the result of isolated human effort. From a materialist perspective, one might argue that agriculture arose independently in different regions simply due to environmental pressures and necessity. However, the deeper question remains: why did this happen in such a remarkably similar fashion across civilizations that had no way of communicating? The idea that information and patterns of knowledge exist in a non-local field offers a compelling alternative explanation. The theory of morphogenetic fields, as proposed by Rupert Sheldrake, suggests that once an idea or behavior is established within one part of the world, it can influence others even in the absence of direct contact. This could explain why civilizations thousands of miles apart began cultivating plants, developing irrigation systems, and transitioning to settled life around the same time. This pattern also mirrors Carl Jung's concept of the collective unconscious, which proposes that humanity shares a deep, subconscious reservoir of knowledge and archetypal experiences. Just as dreams and myths appear universally across cultures, fundamental innovations such as agriculture, writing, and metallurgy seem to emerge in different places without any clear transfer of knowledge. This suggests that human consciousness operates as part of a larger informational network, where discoveries are not strictly confined to individuals or specific locations, but are instead accessed through a deeper cognitive or energetic field. Quantum mechanics, particularly the observer effect and non-locality, further supports this perspective. If particles can be instantaneously correlated over vast distances, might human thought and innovation function in a similar way? Could it be that knowledge, once realized in one part of the world, becomes more accessible to others, even without direct communication? This could explain not only the emergence of agriculture, but also other cases of multiple discovery such as the independent invention of calculus by Newton and Leibniz, or the simultaneous development of radio by Tesla and Marconi. While mainstream science often dismisses such phenomena as coincidences or anecdotal anomalies, the growing body of evidence from quantum mechanics and neuroscience suggests that these events may be manifestations of a deeper, interconnected reality. David Bohm's theory of the implicate order provides a potential framework for understanding this interconnectedness. Bohm proposed that the universe is structured in layers, with the explicate order being the reality we perceive, and the implicate order being a deeper, hidden realm where all things are fundamentally connected. According to this view, what appears to be separate objects or minds in the physical world are actually unified at a more fundamental level. This suggests that all knowledge, thoughts, and experiences may already exist in an underlying informational field, accessible through shifts in consciousness rather than direct physical interaction. This notion is strikingly similar to descriptions found in mystical traditions. Hinduism's Akashic records are said to contain the knowledge of all past, present, and future events, accessible through deep meditation or altered states of consciousness. Tibetan Buddhism describes interconnected mind streams, where consciousness flows across lifetimes, merging and splitting like rivers. Many indigenous cultures speak of a spirit web that binds all living things. If these ancient teachings align with the findings of modern physics and neuroscience, could it be that we are simply rediscovering truths that have been known for millennia? The implications of this emerging science are profound. If consciousness is not merely an individual phenomenon, but part of a greater, interconnected field, this challenges everything we know about identity, free will, and even the nature of existence itself. According to this theory, behaviors, thoughts, and cultural innovations are not isolated events, but rather part of an ongoing, evolving informational system. When an idea, symbol, or event gains significance within a group, it becomes more likely to appear spontaneously in other locations. This could explain why similar scientific discoveries often emerge simultaneously in different parts of the world, or why cultural shifts seem to ripple through societies with little direct communication. If morphogenetic fields store patterns of thought and behavior, then synchronicities could, throughout history, many have experienced moments of profound coincidence, meaningful occurrences that defy logic and statistical probability. These events often carry personal significance, as if the universe itself is communicating through an intricate coded language. Carl Jung, one of the most influential psychologists of the 20th century, termed this phenomenon synchronicity, and a causal connecting principle through which the external world appears to mirror internal psychological states. But is synchronicity just a trick of the mind, or does it point to a deeper, hidden structure underlying reality? As we explore the nature of synchronicities, we must consider the possibility that the universe is an interconnected, intelligent system where consciousness plays an active role in shaping events. If thoughts, emotions, and intentions are not confined to the individual mind, but are instead part of a larger, shared informational field, then synchronicities may represent moments where we briefly glimpse the deeper structure of reality, a structure that reveals connections between seemingly separate events. Jacobo Grinberg's synergetic theory provides a compelling explanation for synchronicities. According to Grinberg, consciousness interacts with a fundamental informational field known as the ltis field, which serves as the blueprint for reality. When individuals experience moments of synchronicity, it may indicate that their minds are temporarily aligning with this hidden informational matrix, allowing them to perceive connections that usually remain obscured. These experiences suggest that reality is not linear and disconnected, but instead an intricate web of interwoven events, thoughts, and emotions. Jung's archetypes and the collective unconscious provide further insight into the mechanics of synchronicity. Archetypes are universal symbols and patterns that shape human thought, behavior, and culture. According to Jung, these patterns exist within the collective unconscious, a shared psychological framework that transcends individual experience. When synchronicities occur, they often involve archetypal themes, symbols, numbers, or scenarios that hold profound meaning across different cultures and historical periods. For example, repeated encounters with a specific symbol, number sequence, or phrase may signal that an individual's inner state is harmonizing with a larger cosmic pattern. To understand synchronicities at a deeper level, we must also consider quantum entanglement and non-local connections. In quantum physics, entanglement occurs when two particles become correlated in such a way that a change in one particle instantaneously affects the other, regardless of distance. This phenomenon, which Einstein famously called spooky action at a distance, has been experimentally confirmed multiple times, demonstrating that information can be transmitted across vast distances without any physical medium. If subatomic particles exhibit non-local connections, could human consciousness function in a similar manner? Grinberg's experiments on telepathic communication provide a fascinating parallel. This suggests that human minds may be entangled in ways that defy classical physics, much like quantum particles. If consciousness can connect across space without physical interaction, then synchronicities may be moments where these hidden connections briefly surface into conscious awareness. The morphic resonance theory, proposed by biologist Rupert Sheldrake, offers another explanation for synchronicities. Sheldrake suggests that nature possesses a kind of memory encoded within morphogenetic fields, which influence the development of biological and behavioral patterns. According to this theory, behaviors, thoughts, and cultural innovations are not isolated events, but rather part of an ongoing, evolving informational system. When an idea, symbol, or event gains significance within a group, it becomes more likely to appear spontaneously in other locations. This could explain why similar scientific discoveries often emerge simultaneously in different parts of the world, or why cultural shifts seem to ripple through societies with little direct communication. If morphogenetic fields store patterns of thought and behavior, then synchronicities could be instances where individuals momentarily tune into these pre-existing informational structures. A person struggling with a decision, for example, might repeatedly encounter signs or messages related to their dilemma, not because of random chance, but because their consciousness is resonating with a larger field of meaning. The 100th monkey effect further supports the idea that information and behaviors can spread through non-physical means. This phenomenon was first observed in primate populations, where researchers documented that once a critical number of individuals adopted a new behavior, the behavior suddenly appeared in distant, unconnected groups. Though debated, this concept suggests that information is not solely transmitted through physical interactions, but may instead be propagated through a collective field. If this principle applies to human consciousness, then synchronicities may be moments where individuals become attuned to knowledge, patterns, or behaviors emerging within the collective unconscious. A compelling example of synchronicity comes from the life of Carl Jung himself. Jung recounted an experience with a patient who was describing a dream about a golden scarab beetle. As she spoke, a real scarab beetle, which was rarely seen in that geographical location, flew into the room. Jung interpreted this as a moment of synchronicity, a sign that his patient's psychological transformation was unfolding in harmony with a larger external pattern. Similar stories abound, where individuals encounter symbolic events, phrases, or people at precisely the right moment, guiding them toward important realizations or decisions. The practical implications of synchronicity are profound. If reality operates as an interconnected system of meaning, then individuals may be able to cultivate synchronicities by aligning their thoughts and intentions with the greater informational field. Many spiritual traditions, from Hinduism to Taoism, emphasize the importance of attunement, bringing one's mind and actions into harmony with the flow of the universe. Practices such as meditation, visualization, and mindfulness may enhance one's ability to recognize and interpret synchronicities, providing guidance and clarity in decision-making. The question then arises, why is this knowledge not more widely accepted? If synchronicities point to an underlying reality where consciousness influences events, this challenges the materialist worldview that dominates mainstream science and society. Acknowledging the reality of synchronicities would mean accepting that reality is not a fixed, objective construct, but rather a dynamic, participatory system where consciousness plays a fundamental role. This shift in understanding could have profound consequences, reshaping not only our scientific paradigms, but also our approach to psychology, philosophy, and spirituality. Governments and institutions have historically resisted paradigm shifts that challenge established power structures. From Galileo's conflict with the Catholic Church over heliocentrism to the suppression of quantum consciousness research, history is filled with examples of transformative ideas being met with skepticism, censorship, or outright suppression. If synchronicities reveal a deeper, intelligent structure of reality, one where human consciousness is far more powerful than commonly believed, then it is possible that efforts have been made to dismiss or discredit these ideas to maintain control over human perception. Despite institutional resistance, the study of synchronicity continues to gain traction in academic and scientific communities. Researchers in fields such as systems theory, cognitive science, and depth psychology are increasingly recognizing the limitations of a purely materialist framework and are exploring alternative models that incorporate consciousness as a fundamental aspect of reality. As interdisciplinary studies continue to expand, we may be approaching a tipping point where the reality of synchronicity is no longer dismissed as coincidence, but embraced as evidence of a deeper, interconnected structure of existence. Synchronicities are far more than mere accidents. They are glimpses into the hidden architecture of reality. Whether viewed through the lens of Jungian psychology, quantum mechanics, morphic resonance, or the implicate order, these phenomena suggest that reality is a living, intelligent system in which consciousness and events are deeply intertwined. Understanding and embracing this universal language may be the key to unlocking a new level of awareness, one where human beings are not passive observers of a deterministic world, but active participants in shaping their own destiny. The understanding of consciousness as the foundation of reality challenges the materialist assumption that the brain simply generates awareness. If consciousness is not an emergent property of neurons, but instead the underlying structure of the universe itself, then everything we experience, thoughts, emotions, physical sensations, are not isolated within our minds, but are expressions of a much greater, interconnected field. This perspective aligns with the insights of quantum mechanics, particularly the role of the observer in shaping reality, and suggests that human consciousness is not passive, but actively engaged in the manifestation of the world around us. The implications of this are vast. If our thoughts and intentions influence reality, even at a quantum level, then consciousness is not merely an internal experience, but an active force in the construction of existence. Studies in quantum cognition, for example, indicate that human decision-making processes often follow quantum probability laws rather than classical logic, implying that our minds operate within a deeper, non-local structure of reality. This aligns with Carl Jung's concept of synchronicity, which suggests that meaningful coincidences arise from an underlying order that connects minds and events across time and space. The presence of synchronicities in daily life provides further evidence that consciousness is embedded in the very fabric of reality, rather than confined to the brain. These moments, where internal thoughts align with external events in seemingly impossible ways, defy conventional explanations based on chance alone. Research into the psychology of coincidence suggests that such experiences are more than just cognitive biases or subjective illusions. Rather, they point to a deeper principle of organization within the universe, one that transcends the materialist framework. David Bohm's concept of the implicate order provides a compelling explanation for this phenomenon. If reality is structured like a hologram, where every part contains the whole, then consciousness is not merely an emergent property of individual brains, but a fundamental aspect of the universal field. This suggests that thoughts, emotions, and perceptions are not contained within the skull, but exist as patterns within this larger matrix, capable of influencing and being influenced by the whole. The idea that consciousness is both local, i.e., experienced individually, and non-local, i.e., connected to the entire field, aligns with the findings of experiments in quantum entanglement, where two particles remain instantaneously linked regardless of distance. Such ideas challenge traditional neuroscience, which assumes that the mind is generated entirely by the brain's neural networks. Yet studies on near-death experiences complicate this assumption. Reports of heightened awareness, vivid experiences, and verifiable observations during periods of complete brain inactivity suggest that consciousness can exist independent of neural processes. These cases, which often include accounts of seeing the operating room from above or encountering deceased relatives, indicate that awareness is not strictly tied to brain function. If the materialist view were correct, such experiences should not be possible. This is further supported by research into altered states of consciousness, such as those induced by meditation, psychedelics, and sensory deprivation. Studies show that under these conditions, individuals often report expanded awareness, unity with the universe, and perceptions of non-local information. These states correlate with decreased activity in the brain's default mode network, which is typically associated with self-referential thinking and ego maintenance. Rather than increasing brain activity, expanded states of consciousness appear to involve a reduction in neural constraints, suggesting that the brain acts more as a filter for consciousness, rather than its sole creator. Jacobo Grinberg's synergetic theory provides a possible framework for understanding these phenomena. He proposed that the brain interacts with a fundamental field of consciousness the ltis field, through neural synchrony and coherence. This field, according to Grinberg, serves as the blueprint for both subjective experience and objective reality. When the brain aligns with this field through practices like meditation or deep states of awareness, individuals gain access to a broader spectrum of consciousness, explaining mystical experiences and heightened perception. Roger Penrose and Stuart Hameroff's OR theory similarly suggests that consciousness is linked to quantum processes in the brain. Their research on microtubules, tiny structures within neurons, indicates that quantum coherence may be responsible for the emergence of conscious experience. If correct, this theory implies that consciousness is not purely biological, but fundamentally intertwined with the quantum structure of reality. This would explain why PSI phenomena, such as telepathy, precognition, and remote viewing, are reported across cultures and historical periods, despite lacking a mechanistic explanation under classical physics. The role of intention in shaping reality becomes even more significant when viewed through the lens of these theories. Studies on the placebo effect, for instance, demonstrate that belief alone can induce physiological changes, from pain reduction to measurable alterations in brain chemistry. The fact that thought alone can influence bodily functions suggests that consciousness is not limited to passive experience, but has causal power over matter. This is further supported by research in psychokinesis, where individuals have been shown to influence random number generators with focused intention. The Global Consciousness Project provides large-scale evidence for this effect. Using a network of random number generators placed around the world, researchers have observed statistically significant deviations from randomness during major global events, such as natural disasters or collective moments of meditation. These findings suggest that collective consciousness has a measurable impact on the physical world, supporting the idea that awareness operates beyond individual minds. Michael Talbot's work on the holographic model of reality provides another layer of explanation. If the universe functions like a hologram, then every part of reality, no matter how small, contains the information of the whole. This means that consciousness, even at the individual level, is connected to the greater field of existence. Under this model, thoughts and emotions are not isolated occurrences, but ripple through the entire holographic structure, influencing both personal and collective reality. This realization leads to a fundamental shift in our understanding of self and society. The belief that we are separate individuals, confined to physical bodies, is an illusion perpetuated by the limitations of materialist thinking. In reality, we are interconnected nodes within a greater network of consciousness, capable of influencing the world not just through physical actions, but through thought, intention, and awareness. Breaking free from this illusion has profound implications for human potential. If consciousness is fundamental to reality, then spiritual practices such as meditation, visualization, and collective intention are not just metaphysical concepts, but scientifically viable methods for shaping existence. Many ancient traditions have long understood this truth, using techniques like mantra repetition, breathwork, and focused intention to alter consciousness and manifest desired outcomes. Modern science is only now beginning to catch up, offering empirical support for what mystics and sages have known for millennia. The implications extend beyond personal transformation to societal evolution. If human consciousness is interconnected, then the way we think, feel, and act collectively determines the future of our civilization. This challenges the materialist worldview that prioritizes competition, individualism, and resource scarcity. Instead, it suggests that cooperation, unity, and shared intention are the most effective ways to create a harmonious world. In the end, the realization that consciousness is the architect of reality calls for a new paradigm, one that transcends the outdated assumptions of materialist science and embraces the profound truth that awareness is not just an effect of the universe, but its very foundation. This perspective does not dismiss physical reality, but instead integrates it into a larger framework where mind and matter are inseparable aspects of a unified whole. With this understanding, humanity stands on the threshold of a new era, one where science, spirituality, and the power of consciousness merge into a deeper, more profound knowledge of existence itself. What could this realization mean for the human community? The convergence of findings from multiple disciplines, including neuroscience, physics, psychology, and biology, suggests that consciousness is not an emergent property of the brain, but a fundamental aspect of existence itself. If this is true, then our thoughts, emotions, and intentions are not confined to the private realm of subjective experience, but are integral to the fabric of reality. The implications of this are far-reaching. One of the most significant is the idea that reality is not as rigid or deterministic as it appears. Instead, it is fluid, responsive, and influenced by the mind. This is not to say that physical laws do not exist, but rather that they are part of a deeper, more complex system in which consciousness plays an active role. This brings us to the question of what this new understanding means for the future. If consciousness is not confined to the brain, but exists as a field that permeates the universe, then we are only beginning to tap into its full potential. Practices such as meditation, visualization, and focused intention are not just psychological tools, but methods for interacting with the deeper structure of reality. The implications of this are vast, ranging from advancements in technology to new approaches in education, medicine, and social organization. As we integrate this understanding into our lives, we open the door to new possibilities for personal and collective transformation. The intersection of consciousness and artificial intelligence provides another intriguing avenue for exploration. As AI systems develop increasingly complex emergent properties, they begin to exhibit behaviors that mirror aspects of human cognition. This raises profound questions about the nature of intelligence and whether consciousness can arise in artificial systems. If consciousness is a fundamental property of the universe rather than a product of biological brains, then the possibility of machine consciousness becomes a topic of serious inquiry. This challenges the traditional boundaries between human and artificial intelligence and invites us to reconsider what it means to be conscious. At a more personal level, this understanding invites a shift in how we approach life. If reality is shaped by consciousness, then our thoughts, beliefs, and emotions have a direct impact on our experience. This empowers us to take an active role in shaping our reality rather than seeing ourselves as passive observers. It encourages a deeper engagement with practices that enhance awareness, such as mindfulness, meditation, and creative visualization. It also fosters a sense of responsibility as we recognize that our inner state influences not only our personal experience, but also the collective consciousness. As we stand at the threshold of this new paradigm, we are invited to embrace a more expansive view of reality, one that transcends the limitations of materialism and recognizes the deep interconnectedness of all things. This is not merely a philosophical shift, but a transformation in how we experience and interact with the world. It calls for a new approach to science, one that integrates the empirical with the experiential and acknowledges the role of consciousness in shaping reality. It also calls for a new approach to education, one that nurtures not only intellectual development, but also intuitive and creative capacities. In conclusion, the exploration of consciousness and reality reveals a profound interconnectedness that challenges traditional assumptions about the nature of existence. The classical view of a mechanistic universe is giving way to a more holistic understanding in which consciousness plays a fundamental role. This shift has implications for science, medicine, society, and personal growth, offering new possibilities for healing, innovation, and transformation. As we integrate this understanding, we move beyond the illusion of separation and step into a reality where consciousness and matter are two aspects of a unified whole. This realization has the power to reshape not only our understanding of the universe, but also our experience of life itself, opening the door to new levels of awareness, creativity, and connection. The studies by these brilliant scientists raise questions about the true potential of the human mind. Are our thoughts and intentions shaping reality in ways we do not yet understand? If so, what could this mean for human evolution? Could learning to harness this knowledge allow us to expand our abilities, communicate telepathically, or even alter physical reality through conscious intention? Grinberg's disappearance remains a mystery, but his work continues to inspire those who seek to understand the deeper nature of consciousness. If he was silenced, was it because he was getting too close to something revolutionary? Was he uncovering knowledge that could fundamentally shift our perception of reality and empower individuals in ways that those in power fear?